what happens when the most advanced air defense network on the planet is mathematically forced to fail. Welcome back to Navy Legends. Today, we are dissecting one of the most brilliant, chaotic, and devastating multi-layered naval strikes in modern history. A morning where raw speed, heavy payloads, and algorithmic deception converged on the Black Sea Fleet. At 0530 hours local time on the 13th of August, 5 Ukrainian Palianytsia jet-powered UAVs were racing toward Russian airspace. Their targets were the heavily guarded warships anchored at the Novorossiysk naval base. To the Russian officers watching the glowing screens of their elite S-400 batteries, it looked like a routine interception, just another training exercise. They had absolutely no idea they were already caught in an intricate trap. 35 miles inland from the rugged coastline, the S-400's massive 91 N6E Big Bird radar was sweeping the southeastern horizon, but the operators were only seeing ghosts. The phased array antenna could theoretically track 300 targets at ranges of up to 380 miles, but these returns were flickering wildly. They would appear for 2 scans, vanish for 3, and pop back up on slightly altered headings. Whispers have circulated that the operators initially blamed a software glitch, a terrifyingly common rumor plaguing Russian ground-based radar systems operating near coastal environments. But the real problem wasn't a glitch in the hardware. It was the inescapable laws of physics. At an altitude of just 220 feet above the waves, the drones were hiding inside the shadow zone created by the curvature of the Earth. The radar beams simply couldn't bend to reach them. Ukraine had intentionally designed the Palianytsia to exploit this exact geometric blind spot. Weighing just 650 pounds, but packing a 220-pound explosive punch, its radar cross-section was deliberately minimized until it was practically sitting at the base's doorstep. But slipping past the outer net was only step 1 of a much darker, incredibly calculated strategy that was about to unfold.
By the time the stealthy Palianytsias crossed the 20-mile detection threshold, the S-400's Big Bird radar finally secured a stable lock. But the battery commander instantly realized his terrifying predicament. He had exactly 45 seconds to act before the targets reached the harbor. 5 high-speed, sea-skimming threats were barreling toward the base at an astonishing 500 miles per hour, mimicking the exact flight profile of lightweight cruise missiles. Target data was frantically patched to an S-350 Vityaz battery positioned much deeper inside the defensive ring. Within moments, 29 9M96 interceptor missiles were ripple-fired vertically into the pre-dawn sky, their solid fuel motors accelerating them to an incredible Mach 3. The lead drone was violently shredded by a proximity blast just 30 feet from the water, followed quickly by the second. But here is where the persistent rumors of deep flaws in Russian command and control structures begin to surface. In a layered, highly complex network, simply sharing radar data doesn't guarantee every battery instantly shares the exact same target ID. The S-400 and S-350 systems were forced to cross-check flight codes, velocity data, and trajectories, losing precious seconds in the process. When they opened fire again, a total breakdown in target allocation occurred. Multiple interceptors from different defense systems converged on the exact same tracks. It was a spectacular, fiery display of absolute overkill. 4 out of the 5 jet-powered UAVs were wiped from the sky, but Russia had just burned through 6 high-tier, incredibly expensive surface-to-air missiles. Their engagement channels were completely occupied, and the heavy launchers were forcefully slammed into their agonizingly slow rearming and reorganization cycles. They had taken the bait perfectly, and right at that exact moment of maximum vulnerability, with the launch tubes empty and the radar operators exhaling a sigh of relief, the real nightmare began to materialize on their screens. Behind the fading flashes of the destroyed jet drones, the radar screens at Novorossiysk suddenly filled with an impossible, overwhelming amount of data. Less than 60 seconds after the first interception salvo, 25 entirely new tracks materialized out of the background clutter. This wasn't a simple localized drone swarm. It was a highly coordinated, multi-tiered execution designed to break the human mind. 4 massive high-speed signals, quickly classified as FP-5 Flamingo cruise missiles, were converging directly on the naval base. each carrying a devastating 2,500-pound warhead. Behind them trailed 21 slower FP-1 propeller-driven drones, moving at a sluggish 110 miles per hour from multiple offset angles. Military analysts and defense insiders have heavily speculated that this flawless, to-the-second timing couldn't possibly have been achieved without outside help. Rumors constantly swirled that Western AWACS aircraft or deeply classified satellite intelligence fed real-time blind spot telemetry directly to the Ukrainian strike package, perfectly timing the second wave's arrival to coincide precisely with the Russian reload cycle. The Russian air defense network was suddenly forced to track 26 incoming threats simultaneously, but they only had about 16 interceptors immediately ready to fire under these combat conditions. It was a brutal scenario of supply and demand, and the attackers held all the cards. The 4 Flamingos didn't rely on absolute stealth. Their danger came from their massive size, their low-altitude flight profile, and the undeniable fact that they appeared exactly when the defenders were looking the wrong way. The commander staring at the tactical display was trapped in a mathematical checkmate, forced to make a decision that would dictate the survival of the entire Black Sea fleet. But as the seconds ticked down, the hardest and most agonizing choice was still yet to come.
The S-300 battery commander, stationed deeper inside the defensive ring, faced a completely impossible split-second dilemma. Behind him were 21 FP-1 drones, numerous enough to easily bleed his entire ammunition supply dry if he engaged them. Ahead of him were the massive Flamingos, specifically designated Enemy 13 and Enemy 08, closing the distance by a terrifying 800 feet every single second. He had absolutely no choice but to prioritize the heavyweights. 2 massive 48 N6 interceptors, each measuring 24 feet long and weighing an immense 4,000 pounds, erupted from their launch tubes at speeds approaching Mach 6. They climbed vertically before diving aggressively toward the predicted intercept points. The first interceptor caught Enemy 13 from above, unleashing a high-velocity fragmentation field that ripped its control surfaces apart, sending the crippled cruise missile spiraling into the dark waters of the Black Sea. But the second interceptor approached Enemy 08 with vastly less favorable geometry. It detonated slightly behind the target, severely damaging the wing and forcing the flight path to violently deviate. But the 2,500-pound warhead incredibly did not detonate. The jet engine screamed on. The onboard autopilot immediately fought the intense aerodynamic drag, detected the massive deviation, and violently pulled the Flamingo back into its attack corridor. Enemy 08 was still alive, still fully armed, and still heading right for the tightly packed Admiral-class frigates. This exact moment has fueled intense controversy and speculation within defense circles regarding the actual reliability and explosive yield of Russian proximity fuses when facing heavily reinforced cruise missile airframes. The failure to secure a total kill on Enemy 08 was catastrophic. And even worse, while the S-300 was frantically fighting the heavy cruise missiles, the swarm of 21 slow-moving FP-1s had pushed over a mile closer to the harbor without a single defensive missile being fired at them. But the Russians still had an invisible, highly classified weapon left to deploy.
Desperate to break the encroaching swarm without expending more precious missiles, the Novorossiysk electronic warfare network unleashed absolute hell. The highly publicized and notoriously powerful Karasucha 4 systems flooded the airspace with localized jamming, attempting to scramble the satellite data and GPS coordinates of the incoming FP-1s. This is precisely where many modern defense doctrines place their ultimate faith, blinding the enemy's navigation so they crash harmlessly into the sea. But the drone designers fully anticipated this exact countermeasure. As the satellite data degraded into useless chaotic static, the drones miraculously did not fall out of the sky. Instead, their onboard autopilots seamlessly shifted complete control to their internal inertial navigation systems. It was old-school, unhackable dead reckoning, utilizing physical gyroscopes and mechanical accelerometers. The drones began to drift slightly under the intense electronic pressure. Some lost a few hundred feet of altitude, while others drifted off their perfectly calculated headings, but the overall formation adamantly refused to collapse. The swarm was only traveling at 110 miles per hour. They didn't need absolute surgical precision anymore. They just needed to maintain their general velocity vectors, stay in the air, and persistently push deeper into the target zone. Time was their greatest weapon. 3 minutes of flight meant covering over 5 miles of distance. The electronic fog had successfully reduced their pinpoint accuracy, but it had entirely failed to remove 21 physical threats from the battlefield. This exposed a massive, highly controversial flaw in relying too heavily on electronic warfare against low-tech, brute force algorithmic swarms. You can jam a signal, but you cannot jam physical momentum. The EW layer had failed to neutralize the sheer mass of the attack, and the inner layers of the naval base's defenses were about to pay the ultimate price.
With the S-300 batteries desperately holding their last few heavy interceptors in reserve for the terrifying approach of Enemy 08, the immense burden of surviving the drone swarm fell entirely to the Panzer S-1 point defense system. A standard Panzer unit carries up to 12 57E6 missiles, each packing a 44-pound fragmentation. In a frantic, rapid-fire sequence, the Panzer ripple-fired 8 of its missiles, successfully blowing 8 FP-1s out of the sky. Combined with previous, highly expensive shots from the S-300, the swarm was rapidly cut down from 21 to just 9 remaining drones. But the Panzer was now effectively dry on guided missiles, and Enemy 08 was still actively screaming toward the harbor at 500 miles per hour, refusing to die. The S-300 simply couldn't spare a single asset to help. With no other options, the Panzer commander slammed the system over to its twin 30mm 2A38M automatic cannons, instantly unleashing a blistering, terrifying wall of 5,000 rounds per minute into the pre-dawn sky. Red tracer streams fiercely cut across the path of the advancing UAVs, manually dragging the engagement into a chaotic, close-range gunfight. The true, chilling logic of the entire strike package was finally, undeniably exposed. The remarkably fast jet drones forcefully triggered the outer ring to fire early. The heavy, highly destructive cruise missiles deliberately forced the long-range S-300s into a paralyzed holding pattern. And finally, the cheap, slow-moving propeller drones methodically dragged the inner defenses into a brutal, unwinnable ammunition battle. The attackers never explicitly needed to destroy the physical radar stations or the launch vehicles. They merely needed to bankrupt the base's available ammunition supply much faster than the Russian crews could physically reload their weapons. And as the deafening roar of the 30mm cannons echoed across the water, the final, terrifying phase of the attack violently breached the harbor walls. The distance to the anchored fleet was now terrifyingly measured in mere thousands of yards. The ultimate survival of the Black Sea Fleet rested entirely on the absolute last line of defense, the automated point defense systems mounted directly on the warships themselves. The legendary AK-630M close-in weapon systems violently spun up, their 6-barreled rotary cannons snapping rapidly toward the most dangerous approach axes. But the sheer sensory overload was catastrophic. There were simply too many targets arriving from far too many distinct directions. The final surviving Palianytsia jet drone, the heavily damaged but still functioning Enemy 08 Flamingo, and the remaining low-flying FP-1s were all converging simultaneously on the confined harbor space. The Seawis cannons frantically shredded 2 FP-1 drones near the harbor entrance in a hail of depleted uranium. A desperate shoulder-fired Igla missile manually took out another that had somehow slipped between the massive pier structures. But every single agonizing second, the shipboard targeting computers spent tracking a cheap, expendable propeller drone was a second that the massive Enemy 08 moved hundreds of feet closer. In a moment of pure desperation, one warship Seawis entirely abandoned its drone target and aggressively turned its fire directly toward the incoming Flamingo. A massive burst of 30mm fire directly struck the front of the cruise missile, causing its trajectory to oscillate violently as rounds punched through the fuselage. The autopilot desperately corrected the roll angle, but at less than 1,000 yards out, it no longer needed a full aerodynamic recovery. It merely needed the forward momentum to carry its payload into the steel hulls. There are persistent rumors that extreme crew fatigue and delayed manual override responses heavily contributed to the chaos in these final seconds. There was absolutely no time left to organize another interception cycle, and then the harbor completely shattered. Enemy 08 violently crossed the edge of the pier area and slammed directly into the vicinity of the heavily armed frigate Admiral Essen. The 2,500-pound warhead detonated with apocalyptic force, wiping out the surrounding pier infrastructure, instantly severing crucial electrical supplies and plunging the massive warship into immediate, catastrophic damage control. But the horror gripping the harbor wasn't over. The 5th Palianytsia, the single stealthy jet drone that had miraculously slipped through the very first 45-second engagement window, dived aggressively from a completely different vector. It bypassed the chaotic gunfire and struck the frigate Admiral Makarov, its 220-pound warhead detonating on impact, ripping through cable routes and igniting a massive, uncontrolled secondary fire across the deck. In the ensuing chaos, as thick, blinding black smoke rapidly blanketed the anchorage and severely disrupted the optical targeting systems, the last 2 FP-1 drones silently slipped through the broken defensive net. One slammed devastatingly into a large landing ship, while the other navigated a brief firing window to detonate violently against an anchored corvette. In mere minutes, 4 separate Russian warships were severely hit. The sheer, terrifying genius of the operation wasn't found in the speed of the drones, the size of the warheads, or the raw, undeniable math of the ammunition shortage. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to Navy Legends for more intense deep dives into the tactics shaping modern naval warfare. And as always, keep your eyes on the horizon.